Grace and peace to all you resonating lights out there. Sorry, the mic was on my chin.
It didn't help that I asked you last minute. You're going to start, right?
Oh, you got this, right?
That sounds like a personal problem. It's good to be back, everyone. Hope you missed me.
Welcome back. Oh my gosh!
Off to a great start.
I mean, this is exactly what my brain is right now.
You know,
Better, closer, warmer.
Disaster.
We're getting there.
Oh man, no, it's good to be here. So hope everybody's doing well out there. In all sincerity, we love you guys. We appreciate the support. Appreciate everybody that's here. Come join us. You know, Sunday we had a great time. I got the opportunity to speak and just really mostly just dishing out some stuff that God had laid on my heart based on an experience that I had through one of my coworkers, and so it was just awesome. I mean, the reality, the tangible, the concrete evidence that God is still moving and still working, always has been, always will be, and we get to witness it right here, right now, in the present.
Right.
And so, it was just a miracle. If you didn't get a chance, if you weren't here, or if you didn't get a chance to hear that from Sunday, please go back and listen just to hear the story. There's a little bit of yelling in there. I'll take the blame on that one. But it's exciting, so it's hard not to raise your voice and get emotional and things like that. So we can open up with you guys' thoughts on Sunday or whatever resonated with you, and then I got a couple of little things I want to throw out to you guys. So
I loved it.
I thought it was great.
We played just because of kind of how the service started going. Josh and I were just playing music along with it, just as the Spirit was just moving with everybody, and that was just I don't know. There's just something that's who was it? Well, I think it was Elisha, that before he would prophesy, he would call for a minstrel and to play, and it just sort of does this thing where you sort of get your heart in rhythm with God by being part of a rhythm, and then at one point you started telling the story, and I leaned over to you. I said because I was playing and my mouth just kind of went like. And I just went blank for a minute, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm playing an instrument right now. So I just zeroed in on what you were saying, because the story was really captivating, especially with the story about Kimberly.
Yeah.
That just got me. And I was, I would go between crying and not, and then like zoned out and like, wait a minute, okay, I'm doing something. But for me, it's always, man, that story about Hagar.
Yeah.
Calling the place that this is the God that sees and the God that hears.
Yep.
Like that's beautiful,
mm-hmm.
because it's a reminder of life in general,
Yep.
of walking through life and not feeling sometimes that initial, that thing that you may have felt initially when you prayed or got saved or whatever it is, that experience that you had at the altar or the experience you had with Jesus, and then suddenly it's like, all right, life hit me in the face, and I wasn't expecting that. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the nose, and it's as soon as life hits you in the face, you're like, all right, well, where's God? Does God see? Does God hear? And it's all those questions get subsided when you feel the Parakletos, when you feel the Comforter come alongside you and say, yeah, I'm with you.
Yep.
I'm with you.
Yep.
And that really affected me, of course. But,
yeah. No, that's awesome.
I mean, I thought, the concept has always been beautiful to me in terms of the God who sees and the God who hears, but almost immediately, and maybe it's just because my brain wants to do the most abstract thing with information when I hear it for the, so many times, because that's a story that's very common.
Oh, yeah.
We've heard it our whole lives growing up, but I imagine, you put yourself in the shoes of the person who's experiencing it, right? Like you're putting yourself in the shoes of Hagar, who, according to a lot of the sages, especially in the Egyptian culture, the Library at Alexandria, the Gnostic text, believed that she was an Egyptian princess.
Yep.
It was given to Sarah
Yeah.
to be her maid because it would be better for her to go with them than to remain in
Wow.
the kingdom.
Yep.
It's actually a blessing for Hagar to go, and her name I think actually means reward.
Yeah.
When you look it up, so it's Sarah's reward for being such a good and godly example in the throne room
Yeah.
with all of the spotlights.
Yeah.
When it counts, when everybody's paying attention, and I think the story changes.
Yep.
Quite significantly for her,
Yeah.
especially when Hagar is brought into the picture. But I digress. Where I went in my mind was the feeling that Hagar must have felt like, oh my God, I'm all alone. I don't know what I'm going to do. And this divine being sees and hears me,
Yeah.
even if nobody else does.
Mhm.
And like, wow, what connectivity you have with divine purpose and truly, I think, love, because I think true love makes you feel seen. It makes you feel heard.
good.
It makes you feel appreciated. Where my mind went to, though, was the feeling that God must have felt when he returns to the garden after man has achieved consciousness.
Yeah.
And he's walking in the cool of the day. And where are they?
Yeah.
I don't see them.
Mm.
I don't hear them.
Mhm.
In other words, it's almost as if in that moment of conscious awakening, you're separated from the divine love
Yeah.
that you truly were born in,
Wow.
that you truly have always been.
Yeah.
And in that moment, it's as if God feels the separation, maybe for the first time,
Yeah.
with at least, I mean, depending on, your scientific interpretation of the Big Bang, and now there's a time before that time. So we're getting into some new territory, maybe not so new territory.
Yeah.
But maybe for the first time, at least in the Hebrew Bible, when we're talking about this relationship between the divine and man,
Yeah.
is there's this first feeling of separation of being seen
Yeah.
and being heard.
Mhm.
And I think it's at that moment that this story becomes that much more relevant, because now God, feeling the separation of man from him, is seeing for the first time that man is feeling the same separation as well.
Mm.
It's not just coming into their own and coming into a new set of understanding and a new way of viewing the world and seeing their nakedness and their vulnerabilities and their capabilities and all of the potential for not just good, but evil as well. It's way more than just living in this garden tending to the animals and the things that are going on.
Yeah.
It's way more than that. But that's not what God is experiencing with Hagar. Is there's this real need to be seen
Yeah.
and be heard, the same need that God had in the very beginning when he lost that connectivity
That's so good.
and lost
So
that
good.
connection. So here, how do you reset the balance? How do you get back to that relationship? Well, God has to become what he lost.
Mm-hmm.
He has to become the thing that was taken from him, so that the creation he's made will understand and see through his example. Again, Jesus becomes the example that's embodied here in the flesh, but
Yeah.
God, from even in Genesis 16 forward,
Right. Right.
is showing you are seen.
Yep.
You
Yeah.
are heard.
Yep.
You are seen. You are heard. Why? Because if you're seen and you're heard, you're going to see and hear me.
That's good.
Because now you're going to feel love, and I just happen to be made entirely of that stuff.
That's
Yeah.
good. So good.
That's what Karl Barth said, because I've been reading a lot of Karl Barth lately, and it's you never get to the end of Karl Barth, because he had one volume that was 13 books over 6 million words. So you never get through all. The dude had a lot to say.
Alrighty then.
He had a lot to say.
I'm going to sleep with this audiobook on and hopefully make a dent.
You'll
The next
but
30 years.
on the other side of it, he wrote other books and lectures that were even more. So he's like 12, 13 million word guy that wrote for he didn't start writing until his 40s.
Oh, you got your War and Peace?
Exactly.
You got your War and Peace? I'll raise you.
I'll raise
You
you.
got your Crime and Punishment,
Seriously.
Dostoevsky? I'll raise
This
you.
guy was like he was bought in hook, line, and sinker on Jesus.
Wow.
But the interesting thing about his story is that he was a pastor during the time of the First and the Second World War. And when the churches of Germany, because he was Swiss but living in Germany, when the churches had signed, I forget the name of the agreement, for both world wars, he was vocal and said, why would the church say we're going to war? Why would we sign a declaration that we want war? Like, that's not the God of peace. That's not the God of love. And then when he was teaching at Bonn in Germany, they during the Second World War, they started requiring the Hitler salute, and he refused to do it, so they fired him. And he's one of the few that escaped and fled to Switzerland, so that he didn't suffer, didn't die, really, like Bonhoeffer did. But he was always very outspoken. But his idea was saying that the church just hook, line, and sinker agreed to this bad idea of death. So his thought was, you can't really take, and so his idea was this. So this is the beginning in the 30s and the 40s that he wrote until he died. I think it was in the 60s. But he took this idea of that the church's dogmatics were flipped upside down. That it was this idea of attaining to God by, of course, the means of our own efforts. So he believed in ultimate reconciliation. He believed in all of that and taught it very well. But his thought was to see God as other first is what's necessary. You have to have this first inclination that God is holy, God is separate from you, if you want to see it that way, but really he's not. And he said he used Romans where it says justified by faith, where he said that it is our faith that makes us it's by faith that we are what we are not. That we are what we are not. And it's that initial understanding that without God, I am not God. But with God, I am God.
Right.
And so it's this crazy, wild connection. And that's what I'm thinking when you're saying that, is that man first has to feel that feeling of separation, even though there's no separation.
Right.
It's just like kids in the grocery store. When you get mixed up and you're in the cookies and you're focusing on cookies and mom and dad are on the aisle over, they're still present. They're still there. You are still with them. You're still of the same substance as your father. But it's this loss of sight. Your loss of sight. You've gotten them out of your own vision. And that's a feeling that Bart said that everybody needs to experience. They need to feel that feeling of separation, even though they're not separate.
Yeah.
They have to feel that they need God, even though that God is with them.
Right.
And so it's this feeling of, and the recognition that God is more than all the other experiences. And and all these experiences lead into me understanding God, even though it feels like I'm not seen, I'm not heard, I don't have relevance, or whatever the case may be, whatever you're feeling.
Yeah, I think that to your point, the God feeling the separation. Obviously, we see Christ on the cross.
Right.
Father, why have you forsaken me?
Right.
Which is that going back to Genesis.
Another echo. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an echo of that, to say that, I am touched with the feeling of your infirmity, which is that feeling of separation.
Right.
Despite the fact that I am not separated, you are not separated, and Christ was not separated, because we know that he's quoting a psalm, and at the end of that psalm, there's evidence that says, no, God never left me. He'll never leave you. He'll never forsake you. He'll never abandon you. And so I think that the echo is there. And then, you said something earlier, and I may be repeating it wrong, but this is what I heard, that when you have those experiences with God, it's like the first time over again. Like that feeling of salvation, or that feeling of redemption. And I almost think that when we have those times where we feel separated, and like I said, I'm probably saying that wrong, but that's what I heard. Excuse me. But when you have those moments of separation, like Hagar did, the feeling of being unseen, then when you know that you're seen, it's like being saved all over again.
Right.
Because you found yourself in a desert. You found yourself, you found yourself being hated on, by others. Perhaps someone that's close to you. Perhaps someone that's, that's a father, a mother, a boss, a pastor, whoever, whatever. You're feeling hated by someone, mistreated by someone. You're feeling hurt by someone, and you find yourself out in the wilderness.
Yeah.
I mean, she runs away, and then the next time she's kicked out. But she finds herself in the wilderness, and you find yourself, or you feel unseen, and you feel unheard, and you feel alone, and you feel abandoned, and all those things. But when you realize, I am seen, and I am heard, and God is with me, and I'm not abandoned. When you realize it, it's like the first time every time. Which is interesting, because there's really not another experience that you have, to your point earlier. There's not another experience that you have that's like that, really.
Right.
Because drugs won't do it.
Nope.
Every time you ingest or inject or whatever, you take some form of a drug, no matter what it is. I mean, it could be something as simple as caffeine, right? Mm-hmm. You need more and more. In order to induce that same feeling, to get the same dopaminergic dump, in your brain and body, you need more. You need a higher dose, right? Or you need a longer separation between this high and that high. And so, and even when you think about marriage and love and relationships that you have, it's like when a man and a woman come together on their wedding night, there's not really another time that's going to be like that, right? It's going to be different. It really doesn't matter how you paint it. That doesn't mean that it's not just as special or just as wonderful or whatever, but it's going to be different. It's not
kind of sounds like it.
Okay, well, maybe
sorry,
it's
Chelsea.
not.
I'm just kidding.
Maybe it's not.
Maybe it's like wine. It's better with time.
It's
maybe
better
it
with
does.
time.
Maybe
Just
it does. But my thought is that the experience itself, it's not going to be exactly the same, right? And it's like it's like watching a good movie, right? You can't go back and rewatch it again for the first time, right?
Right.
We talked about
all
that
the
Sunday. I'd love to watch Ted Lasso all over again for the first time.
Yeah. But you already know what's going to happen.
There's that quote that a man never crosses the same stream twice.
There you go.
When he crosses it a second time, it's not the same man that's crossing it, and it's not the same stream.
Right.
Yeah. But the funny thing is about, and that's good. The funny thing is about
it's as good as your wedding night.
the
baby.
experience.
Drink it in.
The funny thing about those experiences with God is that, God Almighty, I'm going to get so much hate.
Whoops.
Oops. Oh God.
Let's have fun in that comment
sucks
stream.
to be me.
I would apologize for piling on, but
I'm not
No,
gonna.
not gonna.
No, don't. Yikes, Lauren said. Oh man, yeah. So,
Michael's ready to get ice cream.
but the funny, yeah, that's exactly right. The funny thing about what happens with God is that those experiences seem to be just as powerful,
Yeah.
just as redemptive and unimaginable as the first time that you really experienced. You had that felt knowledge that God is with me. I'm seen, I'm heard, He's in me, He's living through me, all those things, right?
right.
I mean, it's incredible to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're onto something with that point in that, we believe in the God that does not change. There's this idea and this notion that love not only comes from God, but love is the substance of what God is.
Right.
And when we have this interpersonal close relationship, I mean, what does God really push us and lead us to, if not a greater and deeper sense of empathy? It was I had gone through this earlier, and I actually have a line on the new creature stuff that you're talking about just randomly. Well, not randomly. We're aligning.
Yeah.
But in 1 John 4, and you can go through 7 through 21 is a really good read on this, but verse 7, Beloved, let us unselfishly love and seek the best for one another. It's that other concept that we're talking about, is you're seeking the best for God. Why? Because God is another.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeking the best for you because you're another. You're not me. You're another.
Mm-hmm.
So seeking the best for one another, for love is from God.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone who loves others is born of God.
Mhm.
In other words, is operating and living and behaving like a child of God.
Yep.
What do we know about children is that they love unconditionally.
Oh, yeah.
They meet new friends and they're immediately best friends. They
Yep.
immediately want to spend
Yep.
every waking moment together. They immediately do not want to be separated. Who does that sound like to you?
Yeah.
That sounds like the God that is talking to Israel, begging them to just have a relationship with him. And they say, no, you just have a relationship with this guy.
Yep.
Man.
And we will communicate with him, and you can have all of that with him, but we don't want to see your face.
Yep.
We don't want to get to know you.
Man.
We don't want to see you. We don't want to hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which means we really don't love you.
Mm.
And if we really don't love you, how are we really going to learn to respect you and fear you? And the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
Yeah.
So why do they foolishly go around in the same patch of desert for 40 years? Well, there's no relationship.
Yep.
There's no vision. They're only operating on what they can see with their eyes, not what they can see with their mind, with their heart, with their spirit, with their soul,
Yeah.
if they really had connection.
Yep.
They're not hearing the voice in the garden. They're not hearing the voice of God. They're only hearing what they can hear in nature. So they are lost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lost without vision and without guidance.
Yeah.
And that's by choice. So because they cannot see and they cannot hear, they cannot love, which means they do not have respect, which means they do not properly categorize their fears.
Mm.
Which is why they're constantly murmuring and complaining about somehow not dying for 40 years in a flippin' desert.
Doubting whether there'll be bread the next morning.
Wow.
Right, as
And
if
it
it's
dropped
ever
from heaven.
failed before.
Wow.
But
Wow.
when you choose not to see
Yep.
and not to hear,
Yep.
changes have to be made.
Yeah.
Why do those changes have to be made? Well, just like in the garden, it's so that God can show you you're seen and you're heard,
Yeah.
which means you're loved, and I respect what you're going to do with the potential I've put in your life.
Yeah.
If only you would.
Yep.
If only you would.
Yeah.
I have all those things for you. And that begins the beginning of reciprocity,
Yeah.
where true relationship lives, whether that's your marriage, whether that's your relationship with your parents or your relationship with your children.
Mhm.
When your children play with you, if you only play with them at 50%, they're not feeling reciprocity from
No.
you.
Yeah, that's it.
And you can have every reason under the sun why you can't.
Yep.
Yeah.
Human
Oof.
beings are incredible at manifesting all the reasons why it's no and
Yep.
I can't.
Yep.
And I'm not gonna.
Yep. And what's crazy is forcing that separation, like the children of Israel did, forcing that separation with your children, especially. All you're doing, not only are you I don't want to say harming them, but it's to their
I think it's
detriment.
harm.
It
Yeah.
is harmful, right? But you're just shortchanging yourself.
Yeah. In your own
Because
experience.
all the love and
Right.
all of the relationship, all the connection that you want with a human being or with God is right there in front of you, right at your fingertips.
Yep.
I think Jordan Peterson's the one that said your kids will have the best relationship. They want to have the best relationship with you that
They can
possibly have, and you can have the best relationship that you've ever had with anybody.
Yeah.
If you'll just engage in it,
If you'll just
right?
give them what
if
they
you'll
what
just
they want.
dive in on it.
Because nobody else other than your children, even your spouse to a certain degree,
Absolutely,
can give you that.
that's it.
Like your dad, your mom, to them, you are the superheroes of their world.
Yep.
You are gods
You're
to them.
it. Yes.
And to them, there's nothing. This is why in Jesus's ministry, and wow, I mean, I feel it all over me. There is this constant drive and pull of the children to come and
Mhm.
just be at his feet, as
That's
if he's mom or dad sitting there
That's
with
it.
all the love and all the attention. And of course, I'm going to take you into my lap.
Yep.
And of course, I'm going to make it all about you, because you know what God is getting out of that? You are all about me.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it is beautiful. And
Yeah.
in this life, when you make the decision or you get the opportunity to be given the gift of children.
Yeah.
The moment you start to see when your son runs up and he wants to wrestle, that's what he's doing. When your daughter comes up and she just wants to put her arms around you and get a hug because she's had a tough day, that's what she's doing. And guess who you are to them in that moment? You're God to them.
Yep.
You're love.
Yep.
They're seen.
Yep.
And they are heard.
Man.
So they want you to see them
That's it.
and hear them.
Right.
Yep.
And they'll be willing in turn, when you're there for them, to see and hear you when guidance and instruction becomes necessary.
Yep.
That's the reciprocity of the relationship.
That's it. That's it.
And I think that's where, God, I mean, you have this real world example of a Hagar moment in someone's life. And again, it's just God showing us still from Genesis to today.
Yep.
You're seen and you're heard, because we are a stubborn creation.
That we are.
And
That
you know, you can hang that hat on dogmatic principles like we've sort of talked on before, and we're careful in this moment, as always.
Yeah.
Cautionary tale, not to denigrate the religious institutions that we came up in or we did not come up in.
Right.
That's not the point of what we're saying. But at some point in time, there was an abdication of this responsibility.
Yeah, it's good.
And that's where Jordan Peterson says, where responsibility is abdicated, opportunity lurks.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, what's that opportunity lurking for?
Mhm.
In the context that you're talking in, withholding love and relationship from your children, if it's separating from relationship with God, it's the opportunity to do what? All the wrong things for you.
Yep.
You want to know how you missed the mark? That's how.
Yep.
That's how. Priorities are out of whack. Your scale to calibrate your bow and arrow to hit the intended target is skewed.
Yep.
It's off.
Yep.
It does not work properly.
Yeah.
And because it does not work properly, you can shoot as many arrows as you want at that target, and you are going to miss.
That's it. And unpopular opinion, church can be one of those things.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Church can be one of those things.
Right.
Absolutely.
Preachers, deacons, music ministers, whatever, abandoning their families, their children specifically, right, in pursuit of God, or in pursuit of the things of God, or whatever the case may be, and all the while your children are left in the wake.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, that's not right.
It's like being in this vacuum of the church forgetting the communion of the saints, or what Paul said when he talked about the communion of the bread and wine. He said, is it not the communion of his body? Is it not? And the word that's used there is koinonia, and it's translated multiple times in the New Testament as fellowship, as participation. So it's the forgetting that I am a part of somebody else's life and they're a part of me. And that's another, again, reading a lot of Bart, but it's another thing from Bart that he says that we are that it is the how I had it a little bit ago, bearing and being borne by each other, asking and being asked by each other, having to take mutual responsibility for and among the sinners gathered together in Christ. Acknowledging that we are sinners, but we are still in Christ, but that I'm in the need of the one that's next to me, and that they're in need of me. So it's this getting lost in this vacuum of, like what you're saying, of the right worship or the right song or the right whatever. There's this meme page that I follow on Instagram about churches, and they're like how all these churches that say the same thing, because they're just that normal big box church that has a lot of the same cycles and a lot of the same stuff. Like, it's not rows, it's circles. Not rows, it's circles. It's circles.
I
and
saw
and
that.
I was like, how are all these churches
that
saying
was funny. That was
hilarious.
Funny. It was at least 50.
I heard the word circle 50 times. But it's like you forsake this whole we're going to look like we're forsaking the system while creating a whole other system. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But if it's, and a lot of times as ministers and pastors of churches, especially those size churches, they're trying their best to connect as well. And they're like, hey, well, if it's working for that church, let's try anything. Let's try anything. All right, no more rows, circles, everything. So they're just doing anything that can help with the participation.
Yeah.
So the right motive is there. Whether the method is right or not, who knows? It's we're all just entering into this blindly, but feeling after the Lord.
Absolutely.
And feeling after Him that we may be found.
Yeah.
I'm found of Him.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily that I'm finding Him. Sometimes I am. Sometimes I stumble across Him in my darkness. But it's this thought of the koinonia, the participation in somebody else's life, that I am bearing and being born.
That's so good.
I'm carrying and being carried.
So good.
And that's the necessity of knowing this mutual responsibility of that I have amongst the body.
Yeah.
And when I take the bread and wine in my body, it's like this N.T. Wright statement where he talks about eternity, how past, present, and future overlap and interlock. And this is eternity, because when I connect in the bread and the wine, I'm connecting to the very first communion that Jesus, the very first Eucharist that Jesus gives them of Himself and says, this bread is my body, this is my blood. And then it's connected to every other time that the church has taken communion, which is one of the main line themes of the church, and every time that they will do it in the future. But not just the act of the Eucharist, but the communion, the actual fellowship that I have with all beings, all created beings, and knowing that I'm part of something that's bigger, part of something that is more than just me and all the things that I want God to see, all the things that I have my request. And sometimes it becomes so selfish and self-centered that if I put my quarter prayer into the gumball machine, cosmic gumball machine, and God will give me what I want. And it's not like that. And then you take that idea, I'm not being seen, I'm not being heard, not being seen, I'm not being heard. And it's like, okay, what have you seen? Have you heard? Have you seen your brother? Have you heard your brother? Have you seen what they need? Have you responded in a certain way? And then you sort of lose this whole selfishness, and then it goes right back into the person of Christ, who thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made Himself of no reputation, divested Himself, and become the servant. So not for anything for Himself, but for all. For all.
Yeah, and to your point, we blindly stumble across God at times, and I think just to kind of to play on your comment about us stumbling onto God, and then Josh's comment about the reciprocity that is, I would say, necessary, within that relationship with God. One of the meanings of Beer Lahai, which is the well that Hagar meets, or God meets Hagar at, right? Is you are the God of my seeing. Another translation is you are the God who sees me, which is what we talked about on Sunday. But it also can mean you are the God whom I see.
Right.
And so it is a being seen and being heard by God. But then there's the flip side of that, of me seeing God and me hearing God. And that, of course, like you said, is going back to even that Sinai covenant of, no. We don't want to have anything to do with that.
Right.
We don't want to look on this, because it seemed like a terrible thing at the moment. And we don't necessarily want to hear this thundering loud voice, or whatever the perception was there. But I was in thinking about all of this, something that was stirred back up, and it was actually a thing that I'd heard Damon Thompson talk about. Was a story at the end of Genesis, in Genesis 30, when Jacob is working for Laban, and he asked to go home. He says, let me go to my homeland. I need to leave. I'm done working for you. Done with this whole venture or whatever. It's time for me to, return home, do my thing, that kind of thing. And really it was time for them to separate, from Laban. And he's like, Laban, whether he heard from God or not, whatever, he's like, well, no, I've heard from God that you need to stay with me, because I've been prosperous while you're here. It's like, and then he says, name your price. Tell me what I owe you. What will it take to keep you here? And so Jacob says, okay, I tell you what, you don't have to pay me anything. Just give me the spotted and the speckled sheep and lambs, or goats and lambs that are in your flock, right? Mm-hmm. And he said, let me go through, let me pick all those out, and let me keep them, for myself. And that'll be my reward for working for you, and I'll continue to shepherd your flocks, and I'll continue to cause, this great production, and et cetera, et cetera. So Laban says, okay, cool. Sounds like a plan. And then, like Laban does, he sneaks around his back. He takes all the spotted and speckled, sheep and goats out of his flock, puts them over here with his sons, and then he puts about a 3-day journey between Jacob and his camp, right? And so Jacob, right, he's got to be clever now, which he has a tendency to do as well. But now he's got to figure out how to reproduce these spotted and speckled sheep and goats, right? He's got to figure out how to reproduce those. Now, the spotted and speckled have come from these pure lambs and goats, right? So pure black, pure white. That's what he had, right? But then, of course, they're reproducing, and that you got some that are coming out pure black and pure white, but then you got others that are coming out with black and white spots and then black and white stripes. Mm-hmm. And it's like, what's the deal,
Black and white circles.
Circles.
Black and white circles.
Circles, yeah, circles. It's all circles. Speaking of circles, crop circles, no. I was talking to a guy this morning on the way to work, a guy that I used to work with. He said...
Wait, that was real. That was real. Okay. We are doing this. Let's go.
He said, he goes, oh my gosh. And I'm like, what? And he says, I just passed this yard and it had a giant circle of mushrooms in it. He said, what does that mean? Does that mean there's a dead body buried over there?
Probably.
I was like, I don't know about that. He was like, I was thinking Salem witch trials, like, I don't know what's going on. And then like 2 minutes later, he's like, oh my God, there's another one. He said, that thing's got to be at least 14 feet wide. Like mushroom circles in South Carolina. Beware. Anyways,
the Keebler elves, that's where they live, and so they're making cookies in there. Just leave it alone. Let the cookies be made, for God's
sake. So you got these spotted and speckled sheep and goats, right? So Jacob has a dream, okay, which I guess is normal for him. So he has a dream, and in the dream, God says, Jacob. And he's like, yes, here I am. And he says, you pay attention to these goats and these sheep. You see the sheep and you see the goats and you see which ones are breeding with what, right? And he says, yeah, I see it. So he comes back to, right? Now he's got these plain black and plain white sheep and goats, right? Mm-hmm. In the dream, though, because, again, Laban has separated out all those spotted and speckled ones, right?
Right.
They're with his sons. But in the dream, Jacob sees spotted and speckled goats breeding with these pure white and pure black lambs. I mean, not lambs, sheep, right? Females. And so it's like, okay, well, how do you know which one's which, right? Because in real life, he doesn't have any of those spotted and speckled ones, so he can't reproduce them, right? So perhaps God has given him some divine information here, right, for him to be able to see the genetic information, right, or the potential that's on the inside of these goats, and so he can know which ones to match up with what to reproduce the spotted and speckled. Because the whole idea is that Jacob is going to grow his flock while he's also growing Laban's flock, so that he can leave with lots and lots of sheep and goats, right? So he's going to have his own fortune when he's done.
Yeah.
How does he do it? Well, he realizes that the sheep and goats are mating when they are at the watering trough, right? So when they go to water, okay, when they go to drink water.
So many
Stick
places.
with me.
I'm with you. I'm
Stick
with you.
with me.
So many places I want to go, but I won't.
I know. I got to listen. We're gonna get there. So,
Please.
but he realizes that they're drinking, right, and that's when the goats come along, and then they mate. So he takes these certain pieces of wood from certain trees, like the poplar tree, I forget the other one, plane trees or a sycamore or whatever, and he strips off the bark and he sticks the poles inside of these troughs, right? And so when the sheep, when they go to drink, they're looking at these poles. Now, I don't know what the deal is, right? Maybe they're mesmerized by them or whatever. They're just locked in. And so then he can direct which goats go to which sheep to reproduce, right? And in the process, he can produce, right, on purpose,
That he wants.
the flock that he wants.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Now, apparently,
It's a great flocking idea. It really is.
so apparently,
What the flock?
yeah.
I mean, they're flocking at the water hole. Might as well.
They're all flocked.
Bunch of wet goat and sheeps out there.
Oh my gosh!
Next time one of you call your husband's a drunk old goat, you just remember this. You remember this conversation.
Oh man! So, in the process of time, obviously, you know, these goats are produced, and his his flock grows actually bigger than Laban's, right?
He
The
does
whole
have the
point-
genetic code, so
He's got it.
He's got
it locked
he's got
in.
a
major
divine-
leg up in the game.
He's got a divine
He does.
revelation
He does.
of genetics
He does.
in a dream.
He does. He has seen something,
Yeah.
right, that Laban has not, right? So
He's heard something Laban hasn't too.
that's that too.
That too.
That's probably strange.
So I'm done.
All right,
I'm done.
thank you. Praise God.
Flocking out.
Okay, so he he sees. Excuse me. He produces this, you know, bigger flock, right, than what Laban gets
Right.
out of the whole deal. But anyways, in the process of time, these reeds apparently are these sticks, right? They have these certain properties that medicinal properties or whatever you want to call it, you know, that helps actually strengthen the animals. It can help in all sorts of ways. But regardless,
Ginseng.
what Damon Thompson was sort of alluding to is kind of this idea of beholding and becoming, right? So kind of what you're beholding is producing something in you, right?
Yeah.
Or reproducing something in you, right? And so these sheep are going to the water, right? They're going to be refreshed, and they're beholding something that perhaps is altogether new to them, right? I mean, obviously, nobody else is doing this. This is weird, right? I'm going to take some bark off of a stick, and I'm going to stick it in the water. And then something's coming along, right? This goat is coming along, and it's reproducing something within this sheep. And so, again, this whole idea of beholding and becoming. So as I was thinking about this story with Hagar and then the story with Jacob, I'm thinking about how God, or Bear Laharoy rather, means that it's not just God sees me, but He's the one I behold. Right? He's the one that I see, and then I hear. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And in my seeing and in my beholding, now I have an understanding of what I am to become.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's in that beholding of God, in the seeing of God, and most of the time in the worst possible case scenarios, or in the worst times of my life, or in the darkest periods of my life, or whatever it is, or even through the suffering, or as a result, or because of the suffering that I am experiencing, that is where or how I am beholding God. It's like looking at the cross, right?
Right.
When you look at the cross, you behold the suffering of Christ, and you see where you have to go.
Right.
You see what you have to become, right? These sheep are beholding these rods, these sticks, these trees, whatever, and in their beholding, yes, they are becoming, but they're also reproducing something, right? And it's just like to sort of piggyback on the kid thing. And I actually didn't mean for us to go down that whole children thing. That just happened, but I was thinking about that earlier too. In the sense that, you know, what children behold, they become.
Yeah.
When they behold you,
Right.
and mostly because they don't have another example.
Right.
They don't have anything else in front of them, you know. But God strategically had Jacob put these certain things in front of these sheep so that they could behold this thing, so that something could be produced out of them, right? That's greater than them. That's whatever. I mean, there's whatever, a myriad of things you could say there, but something is going to be produced, right? And it's the same with Hagar. That right there, that beholding, that she had, the beholding of God, the God whom I see, right? That's when she was pregnant.
Right.
Not when she had already had the baby. That was before she has the baby. Before she produces Ishmael, she has this beholding, right? And in that beholding, she becomes something altogether new and then produces something altogether new. And that new thing is something that is supposed to be great. Isaac wasn't the only promised child.
Right.
Or the only child with promise. Let's put it that way, right?
And there's 8 of them.
Right, exactly. But there's a promise that is linked to Ishmael that is equal to or equivalent to the promise that's given to Isaac. I'm going to multiply him. I'm going to multiply his seed, right? It's the same, basically the same promise that was given to Isaac.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, I just, that idea, you know, was swirling about as I was thinking about this. And, you know, of course, again, in our beholding, we are looking at God, and we're looking through the mirror of the Word. You know, we've talked about that. Obviously, you know, that's within our scriptures, that we are beholding ourselves, right? We're looking in the mirror of the Word. We're looking at Christ. We're beholding Christ and understanding, or coming to some sort of understanding of what it is that we are to become. And also, obviously, what we are to produce or reproduce, right? Because that the part of that beholding is the reproduction.
Right.
How do I emulate, or how do I reproduce what it is that Christ did, just like your children will reproduce the things that you do in this life? Right. I mean, you know, my son, he's 13 now, and he's joined this. It's so funny. I mean, it's just how God works. But he's joined this prayer club at school, right? What was I doing at 13? I was leading a Bible club at school.
Really?
Dead serious.
Wow.
8th grade Bible club. And his the other week, or no, this was over the weekend. He said something about, you know, I asked him how it was going, and he said it was good. And he said his friend preached a sermon, he said, at the meeting the other week, and he said, you know, I was thinking about that, and he said I was just pretending like I was preaching, you know, and I was thinking about what I might say if I was going to preach.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, that's the stuff I used to do, you know what I'm saying? I mean, as a kid, you know, you're just goofing off because, I mean, you grow up in church and that's all you ever do, then you're going to pretend to be a preacher. But but it was this, I mean, that's totally unprompted. I didn't tell him or encourage him. I didn't even know they had a prayer or Bible club or whatever at school, but he saw me.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And not only that, it's not just that he sees me now, it's there is a vision that he has, that our children have, that we don't even fully comprehend.
Right.
And they're seeing something from a divine sense, right?
Yeah.
On a completely other plane, in a completely different realm that we can't even comprehend, just like Jacob did. He's having a dream, he's having a vision of these sheep and these goats, and he doesn't know which goats are striped and speckled, because they're all black out here, and all the sheep are white out here in the real world, right? But God has given him a divine vision for him to see that these are the speckled ones, these are the striped ones. It goes much deeper than the physical.
Yep.
And it takes it into the metaphysical, right? The spiritual, the soulish realm, whatever. All of those things penetrating past all this bone and sinew and everything else.
Right.
But it's just this idea of beholding, right? Like I said, our children behold us, and they are becoming, and that's where it really becomes incumbent on us to make sure that we are setting the best possible example that we can, and that the message is that, okay, yes, I am me, and you see me and you want to be like me or whatever, right? It's just like Paul said, if you're going to follow me, or follow me rather, follow me as I follow Christ, right? And that's where we have to make sure that we've got our heads screwed on straight and we're looking at the right thing.
Yeah.
That we are having the right vision and beholding God, beholding Christ, putting Christ in front of our face, putting the mirror of God's Word in front of our face so that we can see Christ and we can see Him reflected in us, and then reproducing that in the world. But anyway, sorry, I went on a little tangent there.
No, so it made me think of when
I love tangerines.
I love tangerines too. They're delicious, like delectable, the right size and everything. So Josiah, I think it was Josiah, who, when he goes in as king and he's going to reinstitute worship of Jehovah, he goes into the temple and he sees that they have the brass thing. That's what they called it. They gave it a name, Nehushtan, and it was the brass cross with the serpent on it that Moses created in the wilderness because they were being bitten by serpents and they needed this thing that they were afraid of. Look upon it, that's lifted up, behold it, and you won't fear it anymore. Wow. And the lack of fear will remove the sting. And so fear doesn't make love perfect. Yeah. But perfect love casts out fear. So this right love, this right relationship, it made it right for them. But when they put it in the temple, it removed it from its purpose and its place, because it didn't belong in the temple. It was never required. It was never asked to be placed in the temple. So when Josiah goes in there and he sees you've given it a name and now you've made it an idol, you're worshiping it, your vision is focused on the wrong thing. The holy place is right here. The most holy place where God meets us is right here. We're not worried about the thing we're afraid of. Let's focus on the love. Let's focus on the relationship. Let's have a face-to-faceness. Yes. And then it's Jesus that uses that same analogy that says, when I'm lifted up, it'll be the same way that the serpent was lifted up. Yes. I'll be lifted up, and I'm not going to just draw just those that are afraid. I'm going to draw all men into me. I'm going to draw everybody to me. So look at me. Like you're saying, look at the cross. And look at, this is what you're beholding. So it makes me think a lot of Acts chapter 3, where, because we kind of touched on this earlier, but it was these times of refreshing and times of restitution that come from the Father. Yeah. And it's the words come out to mean a recovery of breath. So it's this breathing again and feeling like you've caught your breath. If you are that one that has to behold the thing that you're afraid of, and you have to behold the dying or the suffering of the Lord. But it's found again in the quietness and stillness and peace of the face-to-faceness of the relationship and beholding Him. Because for Peter, it kind of gets flipped around when he's beckoned out of the boat to do something that nobody else is doing, that only Christ is doing, and calls him out onto the water to walk on it, do what he does. But it's like, everybody points to that part of the story where he's focusing on the wrong things. He's focusing on the winds and the waves and the storm and everything that's going on. And that's not a denial of it, because I think that's what happens a lot of times in church, is that people come with their problems or addictions or fears or you name it. They're like, oh, that's, well, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Don't. It's like, well, I'm worried about it. Like, I can't deny that it's there, and that's not what we're getting at, and that's not the point. It's not the denial that it's there. It's, what are you beholding? Yeah. What are you looking at in your addiction, in your fears, in your anxiety, or whatever it is that you're facing? What are you beholding? What do you look at? So it's like what you said. It's not just me being seen and
Yep.
me being heard,
Yep.
but what I see and what I hear
Right.
that is helping form me
Yeah.
into something else and helping me produce something that is better, that's greater. Because if you're focused on just the thing that's wrong, and anybody that I'm not a therapist, you are, but if you tell me if your clients come in there and you're just like, oh well, yeah, well, let's just focus on just that bad thing and let's just talk about just that bad thing all the time,
Yeah.
and then never talk about, well, can we get to a resolve with
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
And what do you behold outside of that thing? Like,
That's it.
you know, it's not just that your life is falling to pieces or that your kids are this or that. Well, tell me something good.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, so-
I mean, it's true, because if you focus on the problem, if you become fixated on the problem, it actually exacerbates the problem. It exacerbates people's anxiety and depression, which is usually what surrounds whatever the problem is,
Yeah.
right? There was a theorist that said basically every problem can be defined within anxiety or depression or both.
Hmm.
And so, but literally, whatever is presenting, to you as an issue is going to be surrounded by that anxiety and depression. If you're fixated on that, it's just going to shoot those two things through the roof,
Yeah.
or one or the other.
Well, I think that kind of comes into play. I was looking up the scripture reference, but Matthew 7:3-5, when he's talking about judgment and passing judgment on others.
Mm.
What are you looking at?
Oh man,
What are you focusing on?
so
Mhm.
good.
So you're focusing on the splinter in your brother's eye.
Yep.
When you have a 2x4 sticking out of yours.
Yeah,
Well, why are you doing that when you're in that condition?
Yeah.
Well, what are you putting in front of yourself? What can
Yeah.
you only focus on? And what is the motivation to only focus on that thing?
Mhm.
Well, and I think this is where, when we are critical of the church and we are critical of religious institutions, I think this is where it really applies, is if the focus stays on everybody's splinters,
Yep.
we don't have to talk about the 2x4 that I have.
Wow,
We can minimize that.
wow,
We can make that almost ninja vanish.
Yep.
A puff of smoke.
Yeah.
And emotion.
Yep.
It's also, I think, when we talk about what are you seeing and what are you looking at, there is, and I think this applies to requesting prayer, and even prayer in church, is what they're looking to the minister to move in the Spirit, to
Yeah.
function in a gift
Yeah.
of the Spirit in that moment in time. But a lot of times what happens is we get caught up in how we feel, the sensation
That's
Yeah.
good.
of it.
Yep.
And then your eyes are taken off of the man that's operating in the gift of the Spirit.
Yep.
You're not seeing him, and you're not hearing what he has to say.
Mm-hmm.
So while this is not a denigration of feeling the Spirit of God at all,
Mhm.
or feeling a certain anointing, or feeling a power come over you that may overwhelm you and cause you to fall out or drop to your knees or cry, what are you looking at?
Yep.
And what can you hear?
Yep.
If you cannot see the man of God that is there to give you the gift of God's revelation for your life, or God's solution for your problem,
Yeah.
if you're not there to see it and you're not there to hear it, you're going to get up no different.
Mhm.
No different.
Yep.
And so many times it gets celebrated, especially in Pentecostal movements, that, well, God moved. Everybody fell out. They're doing gorilla flips and cheetah stomps. Man, it was a great service. But who changed?
Yep.
Because what you're saying, I agree with. What you behold, I don't know if it's necessarily what you become or what you are that you have to grow into,
Yeah.
or that you
Yeah.
have to accept
Yeah. and
about
that-
yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
What you
absolutely.
behold is what you are, or
Yeah.
your being.
Yeah.
That becomes your being. And those two examples, Moses
Yeah.
in the desert with the staff and the serpent, and behold, I be lifted up, just as the serpent in the desert. It's immediately what I think about too. What is the point of looking at something that's that uncomfortable?
Mhm.
Well, from that, it's transformative. It has a transcendent property to it, that once you see this thing you fear overcome,
Yep.
that imparts or births in you
Yeah. Yeah. That's the reproduction.
the understanding that if that can be overcome
Mm.
by this man with this relationship with God, then I can overcome that if I have the same
Yeah.
relationship.
Yep.
If I trust in the children of Israel. They're trusting in the relationship that Moses had.
Mm-hmm.
So they believe now that he's overcome and he's shown us he can overcome, well, we're good now. And what did that birth in them? Healing. That birthed in them no fear.
Mhm.
They stopped being attacked by the serpents. It stopped being a problem.
Yeah.
Now, with Christ on the cross, that's a bit harder pill to swallow, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because
Mhm.
that requires you to do something.
Mhm.
And going back to prayer in church, when you make these requests and there's this great prayer of faith that is put out there,
Mhm.
that faith is real.
Yep.
Yeah.
That faith can move mountains if the person that the prayer of faith is being prayed for is willing to put the legs on that faith and let it go somewhere.
Yep.
Which means change has to occur.
Yeah.
You have to behold what's in front of you,
Mhm.
hear what's in front of you, and let that birth in you
Yeah.
a realization. Because what's birthed in you has always been there.
Yeah.
What this new creature that you're experiencing is not a new creature at all. It's
Yeah.
been there the whole time.
Yeah.
It's only a new experience for you to let it have rule over your body,
Mhm. Mhm.
over your humanity
Yep.
and your five senses, over your sight, and allow that to transcend sight into vision,
Mhm. Mhm.
your hearing into understanding,
Mhm.
your selfish, self-centered human desires into unconditional love.
Yeah, that's good.
It's transformative.
That's so good. And I think about Jesus said, "If you've seen me, you've seen the Father."
Right.
And in his prosness, in his face-to-faceness, right? Because that's what John said. He was pros. He was face-to-face with the Father. That Christ, like you said, it's not so much that he became the
Mhm.
Father, but that he was already the Father.
The church attaches to that becoming idea because
Yeah.
it gives you something to work towards.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
a works-based way
Right.
of framing the argument. If
Dead
you have
on.
to become something,
Yep.
then you got to put the time in.
Yep.
You got to put the effort in.
Yep.
You got to make the sacrifices. All of these things are true, by the way.
They are. They are.
I'm not saying that we dismantle that because
Right.
all of that is
Right.
putting legs on your faith, but it
Yes.
is not what we should be focusing on.
That's right.
It takes our sight off of him and we
So
begin to
good.
sink,
That's so
just like
good.
Peter on
So
the
good.
water when he beheld the Son of Man as
Yep.
the Son of God,
Yep.
defying all of the physics,
Yep.
defying all of the laws of nature, doing what he had never seen another human being done and what another human being has not done since, except for him.
Yep.
When he stepped out on faith, when he put legs on the belief that if I'm seeing him do it, I can do it too.
Yep.
I'm going to step out of the boat and I'm going to walk too. But as soon as his sight veers,
Right.
Yep.
he's no longer seeing
Right.
Yeah.
and hearing the call to step out.
Oh,
Those
man.
two things. He sees Jesus on the water and he
good.
hears the call.
Yep.
He's not the only one on the boat,
Mm-mm.
but he is the one that was willing
To
to
rock
put
the boat.
legs on the
He's
faith,
willing to rock the boat.
rock the boat, and
Yes.
get out.
Yes.
And in that moment, Peter, in that element, in that event, is on equal footing
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
God.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, what causes him to veer his sight? His humanity.
Mhm. Yep.
It's this lack of understanding still at that point.
Yeah.
These are miracles. It's almost as though the disciples saw it as a form of a magic trick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like this one guy's got all the bag of tricks because over and over and over and over and over again throughout his whole ministry of 3.5 years, every opportunity he has is to tell the disciples to go and do it. Go perform the miracle.
Yep.
They need prayer, go pray. I'm stepping out of the way so you can step into the way.
Yep. Yep.
I am the way, the truth, and the life. If you're following me, then go ahead and be the way, the truth, and the life, because then we'll be on equal footing. And man, we're really going to change things
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Because what people are going to behold and what they're going to hear is going to be undeniable because it's multiplied in multiple people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the 70 are shocked when they realize that, well, we can do all these things in your
Right.
name.
Yeah.
It's like, it's funny how that works.
Yeah.
Right. When you are focused, like you said, when you're beholding the right thing, right?
right.
When you've got your eyes fixed on the right thing. Of course, Jesus said, if thine eye be single, right?
Yeah.
If you've got that singular vision, then your whole body's full of light. It's illuminated. My entire being is illuminated, and it's, to your point, it's not the becoming, but now I fully understand who I am or who I'm supposed to be and how much more of me needs to be manifest. And I think that, and I can't remember who said that, but there was somebody that I heard, it's not been that long ago, but they said the same thing. It's not that you're becoming something else.
Right.
It's that you're manifesting more of who or what you are, right?
Correct.
And of course, we've talked a little bit about that too, you're a child of God.
Right.
So manifest that, right?
Right.
And how do we do that? Well, it begins with beholding Christ, because he was the prime example. He was the prototype. He was the one that everybody else was designed after in terms of children of God. Mm-hmm. He was the one that God started with and said, hey, we're going to go based on this design. Yeah. So what do? Well, we look to the prototype. We look to the one that everybody else was stamped out of. Very uniquely, but all at the same time, all one with him, right? And we behold him, and as we behold him, then we're illuminated in our understanding, because now we see, well, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Well, if you've seen me, you've seen Christ.
Right.
And that's where our understanding grows, and that's where we are illuminated, right? And I'd actually had this talk with Caden the other night, me and Chelsea, because he's, whatever. He's a teenage boy, and it's school, and schools aren't designed for boys, and he's got he's got some teachers that are on his case or whatever. But anyways, so I told him, I said, I never really liked to hear this, but it's so true. You got to serve an audience of one, because, and it's like I said Sunday, Peter says, you're a peculiar people. Well, you belong exclusively to one.
Right.
And if you are acting as though you only belong to him, and if you're only beholding him, it's like your wife, right, or your husband. I worked with a guy. His line was always, "It's okay to window shop as long as you don't take it home." Yikes. I beg to differ. I beg to differ, right?
Jesus does too.
Yeah, Jesus
Matthew
did.
5,
Jesus did beg to differ on that one. But I'm beholding her and her alone. I'm beholding him and him alone. But that's that same idea. I behold Christ, and in my beholding of Christ, I am illuminated in my understanding of who I'm supposed to be, or how I'm supposed to manifest. Yeah. Or how much more of me is necessary to manifest, and then I can start to work on putting more and more of this child of God out into the world, into the universe, and so that, again, like a Paul, people can look at me and hey, follow me while I follow Jesus.
Right.
Until you can get your vision fixed on him. Yeah.
That's walking, to me, it seems a lot like walking by faith and not by sight, or not by necessarily the natural.
Because your sight has become vision.
That's right.
Yeah. Your sight, you're not relying on
right.
human eyes and the limitation of what humanity can see optically and focus with their brain. Your sight has become vision. So of course I walk by faith.
It's faith. The faith itself has become substance.
Right.
It's faith is the substance of things that are hoped for. So it's faith
evidence.
has become tangible.
Right.
So it's not just that I'm not walking by the things that I naturally see, but the things that I have believed have manifest, and now they've become the same substance. They've become the thing that I believed and hoped for. But that's the same thing to Josh's point too. When the early church fathers, when they're like, hey, we don't have a word for this connection of Jesus Christ, they use the term homoousion patri. It's the same substance as the Father, and so we're saying he is not different than God.
Say that
he
again.
Is,
say that again. Say the term again.
Homoousion patri.
Man,
and it's a Greek term that they came up with. I think it was at Chalcedon, where they said this has got to be part of what the church believes. If we're going to make a creed, then we're going to say he's of the same. No, it was the Nicene Creed. That's right, because that's the long creed. So the very first creed that they made after the Apostles' Creed, which the tradition of the Apostles' Creed was that each apostle gave a line, because there's different segments and stanzas to it. It makes it look like there's 12 apostles that give 12 lines. But the Nicene Creed, it says of the same substance as the Father. There is no differentiation between Jesus, the Father, and the Spirit. They are one and the same that might look like different persons, but they are the same.
Yeah.
And so when you behold that union,
Yeah.
then you can't help but see yourself in that union.
Man.
If you're looking at God as other, and you feel that otherness and you want that closeness, and then you realize through the Spirit, God is made near to me.
Yeah.
He's made me near, and He's near to me. You can't help but see, for one, yourself in union with God, but your neighbor, everybody becomes in union with God. And there's no earning it. There's no battling for it. There's no any of that.
Yeah.
It's just living in that manifestation or living in that revelation, which it flies in the face of natural theology.
Mm-hmm.
Natural theology it wants to use reason and wants to use logic. So it has to have we have to prove with evidence, with visual things, the being of God. We have to prove that God exists. Like, okay, good luck flying out there and finding the being, this, white bearded gentleman sitting on a throne, I guess. Well, like that's what natural theology leads you to,
Right.
is that there's no tangible evidence of God, but there is.
Yeah.
And it's faith.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of the other lived in the divine theology, which is that it's knowing God by divine revelation.
Yep.
And that anything you know about God is not necessarily going to be gathered through the means of reason or natural things or logical things. It's going to be illogical because it's given by revelation. It's given by revealed understanding.
That's the Jacob dream. That
and
doesn't
it
make
is.
any sense.
And it's not. And again, it's not about like what you said earlier. It's not about the becoming necessarily. It is the being. It's the disclosure of the being.
Yes.
That's something that has lived here under the surface all along. And then I realize, holy crap, I'm the same substance.
Yep.
Right. He was the same substance. I'm the same substance, and I've been the same substance all along. It's just I've put layer upon layer upon layer through bad relationships, through bad dealings, through bad work experiences, through bad whatever, through abuses that might not be my fault and might be my fault. No matter what it is, I've packed in all this stuff. And then you start unpacking all this, and then it literally is the disclosure, the unveiling. You're taking the sheet off of it, and you reveal, this has been here. Yeah. This has been me. And it might take you till your 80s to realize that. And I think that's why so many Christians that when they get into their 70s, 80s, and 90s, and they're just like, there's just things that they cared about, they don't care about anymore. Because there's just something that's revealed, and it's just in relationship with God, and they're more interested in their grandkids, they're more interested in having relationships with their neighbors, they're more interested in things just going well and peaceably between people. Yeah. Because all the other things, it doesn't matter. Yeah. All the other stuff that I tried to layer on, it didn't matter. Yeah. The Son is revealed in me.
Yep.
Right.
And when the Son is revealed in me, I see that I'm the same substance as the Father.
Yeah, and I've seen that in my own father. I mean, just over time, it's like all this other, none of this, as long as it's pointing to Jesus, hey man, that's all that matters.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, what I think about is 2 Corinthians 4:18, when it's we're not looking at the things which are seen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We're looking at the things which are not seen.
Right.
Because the things that are seen, they're temporal.
Yeah, how do you do that?
They're of this world. But the things that are not seen, well, they're eternal. Well, it's what we're doing now.
Right.
I know. Yeah. I know now because it's been revealed to me. I am not what I see.
That's it.
Yeah.
This skin, this dust, this dirt, it is a house.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a habitation. It's a place the real me resides within.
Yeah.
I can't see the real me.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm looking at.
Right.
When I see God, that's what I'm seeing.
Right.
I'm seeing the real me. That's what I am. And God sees me and says, yeah, that's what I am.
Right.
I've been in you
Right.
this whole time,
I think,
waiting for you to do something with it.
I think that's why we speak in tongues.
Yeah.
Because it's that manifestation of exactly what you're saying.
An otherworldly,
Yes.
divine connection to something outside of our natural ether.
That breaks out of my natural being, my tangible being.
Right.
Which it proves that there's something else. That proves that there's, to me, if you want to say proving, it proves to me, because that's what it says, that speaking in tongues is, it speaks to the unbelief within the person speaking in tongues.
Wow.
That it speaks to that first. Before it speaks to anybody else's lack of faith, it speaks to your lack of faith to show you or reveal that there is something that is that is more inside of you in this tangible, natural flesh, but there's something else divine about it. And
Right.
that is, whether you want to say it's breaking into the moment or bursting forth, or it's the cooperation of God already there.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the hand within and the hand without on the potter's wheel.
I think it's
And-
that. I think it's a coalescence.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Like
Just bring together.
everything is. If God is still being God, which we expect Him to be, He is still brooding over
Yeah, swirling.
us, swirling about, and in that moment where you realize you're in the coalescence right now. We're
Right.
here. It's swirling all about
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
And you've just woken up or
Yeah.
realized in the moment, this is where I am now. And it's the same thing that I feel when I feel the anointing to speak to someone or to pray for someone or even to say something more emphatically than I normally would. I know in that moment it's carrying more weight
Yep.
to it because it's not what this stuff that I see would do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not what I would choose to be in that moment.
Yeah.
But I am.
Yeah.
It's not my humanity that is anything.
Yeah.
The humanity becomes the servant of the being within.
Yeah.
The being never becomes anything else.
Yeah.
It's always going to be what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Your humanity, your body, that can become something else
Mhm.
entirely.
Mhm.
We've seen that defy the laws of physics
Oh, yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
gravity and everything else with walking on water.
Yeah.
That body became something else that doesn't play by the rules anymore because the being within it doesn't play by
Right.
the natural rules. But I think when you talk about that 2 Corinthians and you see that, you see the unseen, you're looking to the things that are eternal. I think that's what gets us to the place of greater love, greater empathy, that gets us to the communion piece that you're talking about. And on that, I've been holding this. It's like all this that I had written, we've gone through multiple scriptures that apply. So I'm just going to throw these out there. But to that point, it's Romans 14:1. This is the Amplified Bible. It says, "As for the one whose faith is weak," which could mean to be made feeble or powerless, most likely by doing something that has caused them to miss the target God has set for them to hit. But their faith is weak, accept them into your fellowship,
Yeah.
is the meaning there, but not for the purpose of quarreling
Yep.
over their opinions. The Bible goes on to say people are going to think different things. Some people are going to think they can eat everything. Some people are going to think they just need to eat herbs. We're not getting into the debate on this. What we're getting into is the fellowship, the unique relationship that can inspire something in you when you look and you hear, when you see and you hear from them what I've given to them. That's going to birth something in you that you didn't know was there, but it's been waiting to wake up.
Yes.
And then you go over to Romans 15:1. Now we who are strong in our convictions and faith ought to patiently put up or to bear with, be indulgent to endure patiently or not contend with.
Yeah.
We're not quarreling
Right.
with the weaknesses of those who are not strong. And not just please ourselves, Laban, not make it our main object to gratify our own will. We should be willing to deny ourselves, if by it we may promote the happiness of others. Let each one of us make it a practice to please his neighbor for his good, to build him up
Right.
spiritually.
Mhm.
For even Christ did not please himself, but as it is written in Scripture, the reproaches of those who reproached you, the Father, fell on him, the Son. I think that's where, and we'll pick up with this on Sunday with love that covers. Covers who? It covers us.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because we need to be seen and we need to be heard.
Yes, sir.
Especially when we've made choices based on sight and hearing instead of vision and understanding.
Yep.
Especially then, because then we're lost.
Yeah.
We're trapped by the limitations of what we can just see
Yep.
with our eyes' ability and what we can just hear with our ears' ability. And we're not
Mhm.
tuned into the relationship with the God of love
Mhm.
who sees and hears. And if we will see and hear him, we will have birthed in us the ability to understand more about who we really are.
Yes.
And I
So
think
good.
that's the beauty of what you brought to the table on Sunday. I think I've enjoyed breaking bread with both of you on
Man,
this
yeah,
subject
it
and
was
topic.
fantastic.
I hope it has blessed each and every one of you.
Yes.
I hope that you've gained some insight and some understanding in us, chopping it up here at New Testament Church of the Firstborn. We like to remind you, if you're interested in what we're doing and you want to support us, we do have our own app, The Gathering Echo, where we will receive your gifts, your tithes, and your love offerings. We are undertaking some changes here at the church. We're going to be investing in new LED screens for presentation, making some changes to our stage to make things more visually appealing for our stream and for those of you that follow us, and also begin to share with you some of our music and our song services. That undertaking is no small undertaking, and we're looking in the upwards of $50,000 to $60,000. So if you're interested in seeing us grow, if you want to help us get to the next level of production and get our voices and our ideas and these principles of love and remembering who we are out to a greater audience, we encourage you to please give into our ministry. We also ask, if you're tuning in with us on a weekly basis on Wednesdays and Sundays, to like, comment, get in the comment section, make friends, make fun of us, give us some scripture references, give us your ideas, throw in your quips, throw in your quotes, throw in your books, throw in your ideas. We want to hear from you. We want to engage with you. As we've talked about communion tonight, it's fellowship that matters. So on that point, we'd like to see you here. We forsake not the assembling of ourselves one to another. We have this wonderful blessing of a building and a house that we can gather and feel safe in our sanctuary to explore all of the nuances of our faith, of our belief, of the Spirit and the move of God. I can tell you, when God moves in this house, it is something you want to be here for. And if you've never experienced that, you have an opportunity. 1510 Hargrove Avenue, Gastonia, North Carolina, 28052. We'd love to have you here in service. And if you repeat after me, I love him.
I love him
Because he
because
first
he first
loved me.
Love
loved
me.
me.
God bless you. We'll see you on Sunday.
Love y'all.